Welcome to another episode of the DFIR Report podcast. I'm your host, Kostas, and today we're looking into our latest report from IcedID to Dagon Locker Ransomware in 29 days. We have with us the two of the analysts behind this report, along with our special guest and friend of mine, detection engineer guru, Nas. The two analysts that I have with me today are Renzen and Angelo. How are you doing, guys? Can we maybe go around, introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about yourselves, and thank you very much for being here with us.
Hey guys, it's really cool to be here. I'm Angelo Velletti. I work in Switzerland in a boutique company that offers cybersecurity services. My daily work is incident response and digital forensics. I've been working in cybersecurity in the last 4 years.
Thank you, Angelo. Renzen?
Hello, everyone. This is my second podcast, so I'm very much happy to back here. And again, my name is Renzen Cruz. I work for a security company as a technical director for incident response, and I've been with the DFIR report since last year, a year and a half now. So yeah, thanks again, Kostas.
Thank you, Renzen. And Nas?
Yeah, well, my name is Nas. I'm a security researcher detection engineer at a security company called Nextron, and I maintain the Sigma project along with other colleagues and other projects. I'm happy to be here, finally. It was long awaited, so yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, we were trying to get you on the podcast since day one. But everybody has so busy schedules nowadays. But thank you very much for making it. Thank you, everyone. And I just thought maybe we can start looking into this report and maybe start from the initial access. Let's maybe look into the campaign that was used for this initial access. I believe you mentioned the Prometheus campaign. Is there anybody here that we can help us explain about this campaign and some of its characteristics and how did the initial access happen?
Yeah, maybe I can start with that. So this is a campaign where we've been seeing this from the community side since 2020. There's a lot of an intel reports from different security companies that provides this kind of intel where they basically observe a new underground service. Well, new during that time, year 2020. This is being called as Prometheus TDS. TDS means the traffic direction systems. So this is an underground service that distributes malicious files, and it also redirects visitors to a phishing or to malicious sites wherein the panel or the administrative panel has been controlled by this threat actor, on which it's kind of like a flexible where they can configure it based on their needs, whether they wanted to download the malicious files, they wanted to configure the restrictions of the users or the geolocation, and maybe they want to get some information like the browser version and operating system. So it's considered as a malware as a service, or MAS, MAAS. And since 2020, I'm not sure up until now, but during that time, it was considered as one of the services available for the underground, and they asked for a subscription-based service as much as $250 per month for the people on the underground. So this is how this particular phishing started and navigates through the phishing email, which we're going to talk about in a bit.
Let's take a quick break and listen to the services that the DFIR report has to offer to help businesses and individuals in the field.
The DFIR report provides a range of services, including private threat briefs, which include 50 plus private reports annually. Another service we provide is our threat feed, which specializes in tracking command and control frameworks such as Cobalt Strike, Metasploit, Sliver, and more. We also offer a private rule set that consists of exclusively curated rules using insights derived from private threat briefs and other internal cases. Want to take the role of the investigator? We now offer the data we use to analyze the intrusions you read on our public and private reports through our new training platform. Dive into the real intrusion logs and certify your skills with our DFIR labs. Check out our website for more details. We invite you to reach out for a personalized demo of our services via our Contact Us page.
Yeah, that's very interesting. We discussed on the previous episode how the criminal market works a little bit. Very interesting to see how everything comes together and up to the final phishing email that people are receiving. On that phishing campaign, what was their aim for initial access? What was the execution patterns we observed on the beachhead host? Angelo, would you like to go over this for a bit?
Yeah, sure. So initially we saw a JavaScript file called document scan that basically, after it was executed by the victim, it connected to the first command and control server, then created a scheduled task to gain the initial persistence to have an IcedID persistent execution. And as always, with IcedID, we see a DLL file drop in the ape data directory. And then a little bit later, so just 1 minute after, we saw a lot of the classic IcedID discovery commands. Indeed, I will say that we can already see here a detection opportunity, for example, because we have got JavaScript file that creates subsequently a scheduled task, but especially the run DLL process that then launches a lot of discovery commands, for example, the net process. Then subsequently, after an hour of the enumeration commands, we saw also the usage of BNC. That is basically a module embedded into IcedID.
And those JavaScript files, to my knowledge, they are quite obfuscated and they are very difficult to decode as well. In a way, they are able to bypass detections and any preventions that people may have via an AV or an EDR sensor on their host. Maybe Nas can speak a little bit more on that. I know he's a detection engineer expert in here, and I'd love to hear his opinion because, to my experience, JavaScript files, I just had a very difficult time, detecting or looking into those files from an analysis point of view.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. JavaScript has always been like the bad apple in the detection space. Like a very obfuscated file can make your life very difficult. And usually, like my approach, and I believe that the better approach usually is to not analyze the file, but look at it dynamically, except if you have to. The best approach to find what a JavaScript is to execute it somehow via Node or via your browser or in a safe environment, and then try to determine what it's doing first to determine its maliciousness. And perhaps that's enough for you, like depending on your level of skills or your level of analysis, or depending on the level of threat that you're analyzing. That usually is enough, because like the amount of effort required to deobfuscate, sometimes they actually put a lot of effort into making it very hard. But at the same time, like if you're using like methods of detections, like specifically Yara, to detect the content of the file, one technique that we can use against the threat actors themselves is that the fact that they obfuscate the file too much, like a typical obfuscation would be to include a lot of comments, for example. You could create these like hunting rules in general that detects, for example, multiple concatenation. That could be suspicious in combination with like different comments and the line is split into different like strings. Like when we see in this report, like there is this comment every second string. Like there is a string and then some comments, and you might be surprised if you look from a hunting perspective of these kind of things. Yes, that are used legitimately, but if you're looking for something malicious, you can then start to determine that this is indeed very suspicious or highly suspicious. And then you can start to look into it a bit more. But unfortunately, I don't know of any good way to deobfuscate them like easily or rapidly.
Yes, thank you very much, Nas. There are some tools for certain malware, like bootloader, that researchers have helped us with developing a tool to quickly deobfuscate and provide you with the IOCs really fast. And that's so useful. That speeds up the analysis because you're just getting the C2 domains or IPs related to that malware. So you can look into your environment for any hits on those. But if there is something that, if there is a malware that doesn't have such tool out, you have to look into it yourself. And yeah, using dynamic analysis would probably work best. Does anybody have anything to add on that topic?
Yeah, I think from the last report that we have published related to the bootloader, we actually used a script that was open and free to everybody. It was actually created by Mandiant. So it's really an easy task of just writing, or not writing, but just executing that Python script, and that extracts the whole thing. It extracts the whole IOCs that you need to know. It also creates a specific or separate file that dissect some of important information from that bootloader.js. On this stage of this IcedID JS dropper, we also use an emulation tool. We call it like Bax-JS. It's a pre-built-in tool when you install Remnux VM. That contains all these malware analysis tools. And then after you run the Bax.js, essentially it just emulates the JavaScript on its own. And also it extracts these whole IOCs that you need to know into another file. And then it produces another sort of second stage of JavaScript that you can easily just beautify. And then that beautification of JavaScript is also available from the Remnux. So the JS-beautify is also what we use on this JavaScript for us to sort and parse things out without writing a parser manually or from scratch. And it gives us the whole C2 and the whole command line parameter once you run those two tools that are available on Remnux VM.
That's great. I haven't heard of that tool that you mentioned.
That's Bax-JS. And then the second thing to beautify the JavaScript, there's actually a lot of online tools for you to beautify the JavaScript, but there's a built-in tool, the JS-beautify. Those are all available on Remnux VM. I think these tools can be acted as a quick wins for you to save more time. But essentially, when you have to do some sort of manual approach, like I think CyberChef is the king, just to decode and decrypt all these obfuscations and encoded commands. I'm not sure if some other folks here are using other tools, but I think CyberChef is something that I normally use if ever there's a second, third, fourth phase of obfuscation, especially for the JavaScript, which is kind of like insane sometimes. Sometimes it just takes you a lot of hours for you to just decode a single C2, which is kind of annoying.
Yeah, I've been using CyberChef for many years now, and I don't know any better tool than that. Maybe we can move a little bit to the next phases here. And after the malware was executed, I think we saw the Cobalt Strike beacon being dropped and being loaded in memory by the adversaries. But what are some of the interesting factors of the post-exploitation activities you observed? Angelo, is there anything in specific that you found interesting after the initial execution on the Beachhead host, based on your analysis?
Well, for sure, we saw the usual abuse of Cobalt Strike. Nowadays, like ransomware attacks are mostly performed through Cobalt Strike, so nothing new on that side. For sure, it was interesting that the threat actor, in order to download the Cobalt Strike beacon, instead of for example, using IcedID directly, since that connection to the command and control use file.io as a cloud storage to actually download the Cobalt Strike beacon and then executed it through run.dll. Then if we always talk about Cobalt Strike, obviously we saw the usage of the PowerShell functionality to obviously move laterally and download further stages. So basically this PowerShell script is directly executed and is usually encrypted through XOR. Now in this case, the threat actor didn't even modify the classic XOR key that is used in the Cobalt Strike beacon, because it's 35 by default. And therefore we actually were able to decrypt pretty easily, and then we analyzed them. This PowerShell code basically uses a lot of managed code to use Windows APIs and then directly load the shellcode in memory. And as we were able to see, actually those shellcodes were not modified through the malleable profile, because they included also the classic Cobalt Strike initial lines, basically MZARUH, that are usually used in YAR rules to actually detect Cobalt Strike beacons in memory. But then also, like, a very interesting thing about the post-exploitation was a massive usage of scheduled tasks, because the threat actor didn't just abuse the IcedID persistence to continuously access the infrastructure, but instead created multiple tasks in different servers. By multiple, I'm talking about more than 5 scheduled tasks, and also deployed a GPO to actually distribute the Cobalt Strike beacon in different systems. Probably the GPO was the most interesting thing.
And in terms of timeline, so listeners can get their head around here, we are on day 2 of the intrusion, and threat actors are already looking into moving laterally to the network using Cobalt Strike. The way they achieved that was by copying the Cobalt Strike DLL to a remote host that they wanted to access, and then executed WMI commands, if I'm not mistaken, to execute the Cobalt Strike beacons. That's very interesting, because there are so many ways of identifying this activity. But Nas, what do you think about this timeline of events? We are on day 2. They are already going for the kill, looking into executing Cobalt Strike on all the servers and all the workstations that they could get access to on the domain, and trying to find to identify any open source, and trying to find interesting files that they can move out, meaning exfiltrate. How often do we see that, right?
Yeah, it's very common. But before that, I just wanna mention something regarding the download of the Cobalt Strike beacon via the PowerShell using the file.io, because I think that's something interesting. Using like the file sharing websites, we see that very often, but it's such an easy way to sometimes track, because most of the time, even if you use these file sharing, you don't use all of them. You're using like a couple of them. And we've seen many times like people using Pastebin, using Mega-NZ, using DDNS, using Anon files. And those are all like very interesting file sharing stuff that, like, from a detection perspective, what you can do is you can build a list around this and at least exclude what you usually use in your environment. And it would be very like easy to spot the anomalies. And even like if you go to prevention, sometimes these file hosting websites needs to be blocked and can be blocked. So it's best to block them. And like if you see that like the usual stuff, and I presume that they are being so fast sometimes, is because these things are easily detectable and easily signable, as we say. That are easily, you can write a signature for them very easily, and like this goes to the old adage, is that yes, sometimes it's good to be sophisticated, but as Angelo mentioned, is they're using almost everything to the default, and they are like acting very quickly. And the reason behind that is that yes, there are defaults, yes, but if you don't have the necessary like mechanisms in your environment, you're already like doomed, because it's very quick. Like they're doing this and they're doing that. The scheduled task is here, the GPU is there, and the moment you realize what's going on, it's already too late. But like you can extrapolate from this idea, like they're using PowerShell download file, like the usual cmdlets from PowerShell to download these things. They're using the Cobalt Strike default header that you can use, like classic Yara rules to detect. And I feel like it's understated and at the same time boring, but it's very common for these kind of threat actors to act like, I believe.
Yes, they're using legitimate services, online services, to host their files. One thing to be aware is that you have to have situational awareness of the environment that you're trying to protect, and make sure that you know what type of services your users are using. If you are a very big organization, I'm sure you will have users going into file.io and mega. Whatever that website is, on the mega cloud hosting provider, and they will be downloading and uploading files over there. So make sure you baseline the activity before you put any detections or preventions in place. I mean, it wouldn't harm to put a detection in place for it if you have the capability, but preventing such activities is when it becomes very difficult. But yeah, I agree. Some of those basic things would just trigger alerts and would have an analyst look into the activity a lot sooner. Now we have an intrusion that lasted 29 days. We are on day 2. Imagine if we had a detection where it was triggered on file.io access, and we were already looking at this activity. It would have been a lot better to attend to this intrusion on day 2 rather than in the middle of the intrusion, where possibly many of the objectives have already been established by the threat actor. Yeah, thank you very much, Nas. It's nice that you have this mindset of bringing things back to the basics. I love that, because detection does not have to be complicated. And that's why I value your opinion a lot. And I listen to what you have to say for a long time now. Detection has to be straightforward and can be easy. Looking into the discovery as well, when I mentioned about they are looking into shares as well, we saw that on day 2. And I believe we saw some data exfiltration as well, using rclone on day 2. So they went straight for establishing their objectives. And clearly, one of those objectives were to steal data. Did you guys, the 2 analysts that we have with us, did you look into what type of files they tried to exfiltrate and from where? What were they interested on?
Yeah, I think I can answer that. So when we talk about the exfiltration, there's like 2 parts here. So they use rclone. When they try to use rclone, which gives us a lot of artifacts from the host when you try to execute it, including the rclone.conf file, or the configuration file of rclone. So when we look into it, we saw that they're using port 666, and then they're using the pcloud service to exfiltrate the data. But upon looking into the network connectivity and network traffic, based on that timeline of interest, we didn't see like a successful exfiltration. So we also noticed that they've leveraged the AWS CLI v2 here. So that is actually a legitimate binary that's commonly used for AWS kind of activities and behavior, and then they've used that binary to exfiltrate the files that they're interested with. So when you go to the report, you can see on the AWS CLI command line parameter as a whole, what are the different file extensions, files that has a specific file extensions that they're interested with, such as JPEG file or I think there's like a DB down here as well for database or cab jar. So these are the things that they're interested with. So again, our clone, which is commonly used by these threat actors, ransomware gangs. But one of the most interesting part on this report, which we can talk about the different features of the PowerShell script that they've used as well. But the binary, the AWS CLI v2 was mainly the tool that they've used to successfully exfiltrate these files. Not sure, Angela, maybe you want to add something into that?
Yeah, for sure. So basically, related to the AWS CLI, basically they use a custom PowerShell script called AWS Collector that had basically all the features to perform the attack on the entire kill chain, I would say, because you have got tools to perform the discovery and the enumeration of the Active Directory and the infrastructure. For example, you have got Sharpound. Then you have got tools to actually bypass security defenses and also obviously hide the malicious activity that were performed. So specifically the deletion of Windows security events. You can also bypass AV or EDRs. Now, honestly, I don't know how much those techniques are actually working right now, but still. Then also like functionalities to connect to Telegram, other offensive tools probably coming from the PowerSploit package. So for example, WMI exec, etc. Until you come up to the actually deploy of the ransomware. So it was fully featured PowerShell script.
It's a 14K lines of codes, by the way. So it took us really couple of weeks and we were actually arguing when we are building this report. We were like, should we put a separate report for us to dissect more on these 14K lines of PowerShell scripts? But we decided to just put like an infographics and then like dissect the most important points of this script. And if the people go to the report, you can actually see the comments and also the different versions of the script, like how the threat actor maintains this script. There's also a timestamp over there, and it's really an amazing script, to be honest, and it's fun to dissect this.
I remember when we first came across this script, I think we put a Twitter post out there, and we did a little bit of not a very detailed level of analysis, but we just posted about a couple of its features, and we found the comments hilarious. Yeah, but to this day, I don't know why they chose to comment on the script and keep a track of all the comments based on different versions. But also, if you see at the top, if I remember correctly, anyway, I haven't looked at the script for a while. If you see at the top, they had a chat type of, like they had a conversation. I'm sure it was more than one person, or it was one person talking to himself or to herself, and just mentioning why things don't work and the frustration of something.
When I saw that, when I saw that, I like to imagine them like having like a task. And somebody, his task was committing, and his boss said, "What did you do today?" "I committed to the script. I added functionality."
Yeah,
it's like they have a Git and everything.
Yeah, it read something like that, and it was so funny to see the language that they were using, and why would anybody comment on the script and have a conversation on the script in that way? To this day, I don't know why that was the case. Did they keep tracking of everything on that script using comments? Because that script, as Renzen mentioned, it was huge. And it was just so funny to see. But on a more serious note, I think it was a script that was used for as a everything in one solution, and was shared with multiple groups, or it was used in final stage or in every stage of the intrusion, I guess. And you can see at the end stages where we could see the different ransomware that they were mentioning on the script. We saw variations of those. We also saw different tools being used, and mentions to tools that we didn't see in this report. So I would have to say, if I would have to guess, they would take this tool, uncomment what they want, what features they want the tool to have, change a couple of things around, move a couple of parameters here and there, and just make it for their purpose, for that specific intrusion or objectives that they had for that intrusion. And then they would revert back to other features for different type of cases. It had everything from hilarious comments to different tools and execution of those tools for different phases of the intrusion. It was a very nice find and great analysis on this script, guys. Yes. Thank you very much, Angelo, for bringing it up, because I forgot about it, and I really wanted to mention it. Did we see that script being run straight away, or was it just AWS CLI tool that we saw along with our clone?
We saw it on the second day. So basically, in the initial phases of the attack, especially if we consider that this case lasts for 29 days. So I would say that day 2 was in the earliest phases. But then we saw a lot of keyboard activities, especially through Cobalt Strike. And then in the end, they used the AWS collector to actually deploy Dagon Locker Ransomware. So it was mainly used for the main activities. So basically exfiltration and also impact.
Thank you, Angelo. And regarding the AWS CLI, yeah, sorry, Nas.
If I may, just wanted to comment, because I believe Angelo wanted to make that joke about bypassing EDRs, but yeah, he made it indirectly. But what I wanted to mention is, in the section where they disable the EDR, is they use the functionalities of the processes themselves. Like every EDR or antivirus has their own like admin utility or whatever, where you can stop the service, and if anti-tampering is not enabled, the service is stopped immediately. And this is very interesting. Why? Because many people think when they hear like disabling AV or whatever, they think that it's very complicated. But if you just made a simple mistake of not enabling like anti-tampering or enabling a password for your antivirus, like it's only a command away. Like stopping the service is very easy, and killing the process is very easy, and that is considered like a bypass, quote unquote. You're actually killing the service, but like in the normal sense, it's actually a bypass. And many people do not monitor those things. So that I highly suggest, like, one thing you should do is you should look at your admin utility for your antivirus. Like sometimes it's not documented or it's hidden in the documentation. You should look into your like installation folder of the antivirus, look up those binaries and try to figure out some command line flags that can be abused. Like that is very, very like an easy way, but it's a very effective way, because at the end of the day, if I want to stop your antivirus, and I know your admin like do that regularly sometimes, I just use that. I will not use some sophisticated, I don't know, process injection, whatever, to achieve that. So that's something to keep in mind, I would say.
Yeah, even if right now a lot of EDR products have basically the tokens or passwords enabled by defaults, and those strings can only be taken from the management console. So in those cases, actually, you need to have management console access to actually be able to stop the process. However, also we should also consider that basically the script, based on the comments, obviously it was developed since the 2020, so obviously it could have also a lot of features that are not useful anymore.
Yes, and to the point that NAS is making here as well, we should consider that many environments will not have the right configuration on their EDRs, so they might not have tampering enabled, and it's gonna be just as simple as maybe end a process or stop a service or something like this. Although I have seen EDRs that even with tampering protection in quotes enabled, you can just stop the service if you have system rights, and that's very easy to get. There are so many methods. Considering how our own configuration, and make sure that all hosts that we have in the R on them are correctly configured under the right policy and are in detect or prevent mode or whatever our policy is. I think that's very important. Make sure that if a host diverges from that configuration that we have set, we get notified. Most of the intrusions I see is because teams are misconfiguring EDRs, and we have a point of entry in the organization where we didn't know about, and we do not collect the telemetry for whatever reason, and the EDR sensor is not configured according to our policy. So we have an easy way in for threat actors to begin their intrusion from there, bring all their tools into that host, and nothing will be detected. Yeah, thank you very much for this, everyone. Let's go towards the end of this intrusion. Unless someone wants to highlight something from mid intrusion, I guess from days 4 to 13.
Yeah. I think there's an important part of the report, which basically the threat actors use a lot of discovery tools. So aside from like lol beans, which can easily be detected, like, the ipconfig, netview, nltests, whatever, they've also deployed ShareFinder, which we had like a separate report for that a few years ago. They've also deployed a seatbelt, which is like an open source tool to perform host survey for those kind of safety checks. We've also seen that this threat actor use Ookla, like the speed test binary, just to determine the speed of how speed or how fast they can upload or download the files that they're planning to do. There's also Bloodhound that was observed on the domain controller. On the third and fifth day, then there's the NetScan was also used, which is also one of the favorite toolkits by these ransomware gangs and e-crimes, or whatever you call it. And there's also AD-Find. So almost most of the ransomware reports that we had, there's always AD-Find, whether it's the executable version or the batch file version. There's always something like that, and the NBT scan. So those are the combinations of multiple toolkits that was used during the discovery phase of this attack.
Thank you, Ransom. And all these tools, they just brought into the environment as binaries?
Yes, there was a I think there was we've seen some logs where the Bloodhound itself was there. The binary of the Ookla was downloaded as well. I think there was some injected module within CobbleStrike, and then from CobbleStrike they run this specific tool through memory scan that I think Angela maybe correct me if I'm wrong on that.
No, that's correct. Basically, also the executables were dropped through the AWS collector file.
Very interesting. They brought everything in, and if you just had an AV installed, it would probably have caught half of them. This is how easy it could be to prevent something, but as we discussed, misconfigurations happen, and we have to have a different security control in place to detect it in later stages of the intrusion.
And also,
So,
I just want to add something interesting I've noticed. It's not very common, but I noticed, and I believe threat actors, like, I don't have proof, so don't quote me on that. But I believe some threat actors, some threat actors actually uses these tools with the knowledge that the antivirus exists, just because some of these tools actually are crossing the lines between the admin side and the malicious side. And by having that, I've sampled onto environments where, like, Bloodhound was added as an exclusion to one host randomly because somebody decided and he got approval for it, and he used it to actually scan it in defensive mode, like to determine stuff, and rclone and all of these things. Like, sometimes they trigger the antivirus, but they are allowed or they are ignored because they trigger the antivirus more often. And the threat actors also play on this code, meaning that they think that mixing those alerts into normal alerts, because if everything is medium, quote unquote, we're using Lolbin, if everything is medium, the analyst might, like, doesn't necessarily have a good framework sometimes to evaluate all the alerts if they are all medium. Like, depending on what you use, you're probably looking at the alerts from top to bottom, and with the correct timing, you're actually in the middle of 17 alerts, so you're already ahead of the analyst. And that's something, like, I believe threat actors at least try to use, or they notice that more often, I believe. It's
many of us have been in that place where we have detection alert fatigue by being an analyst and having to deal with all these false positives that you see. Sometimes you're late on your shift and you're just very tired and you're just missing things, I know how this could feel. So yeah, absolutely, I agree with Naskia. And another thing is, there have been cases where these tools have been used just as a testing method to test protections or collect some information from users, and it could be considered benign by some people. So
that brings into the topic of, like, how good the policy was when you're allowing a certain tool. It's like, let's say, okay, you're going to use that tool for a specific time frame. So when that approval or whitelisting going to expire, because at the end of the day, sometimes we just tend to forget that. And then when the threat actor kicks in, then, oh, the Bloodhound was allowed. All right, so let me leverage that because no one will detect me. No, everyone knows that it was allowed at some point, and they're still there. So I think I've seen that on my very recent case where it's completely not part of this case, but there was an Atera involved, like on one of the RMM tools that we know of. Atera was involved, and then suddenly the threat actor initial access vector was to buy an Atera login, and when we tried to look into the policy of the client, we saw that it was allowed by default, and they just whitelisted, so there's really no alerts coming in. But if you look into the RMM mechanics of that, like if you gain access to the console, you can just literally do whatever you want, because you can launch a PowerShell, you can launch a command line, so it's like a legitimate backdoor within your enterprise. So I think just the policy thing on, okay, you need an access to that. Okay, so super sort of approvals and the time frame where it needs to expire is also very important.
Yeah, and here we are talking about malicious binaries and open source tools where threat actors are using to get access or do collect information from hosts and things like that. And we are not even considering, at least for this report, the use of RMM tools. Imagine if organizations are not able to defend themselves against malicious binaries in that way that are brought to the environment and executed manually by the threat actors, imagine how difficult it will be for an organization to defend against an RMM tool, especially if you don't have certain policies within your environment and you're allowing your users to use whatever RMM solution they want to access their host, their workstation. That becomes very, very difficult, and this is why threat actors still are successful at infiltrating into organizations, even with more robust security solutions. Everything starts with the baseline and make sure the policies that you have are enforced. Otherwise, it will just be very difficult to defend against low-level threat actors like these ones that just want to deploy ransomware and steal information from your organization, because they can just use an RMM tool, and that would be even 10 times more difficult to detect than what we see in this case. Thank you very much, Renzen. And lastly, maybe we can talk a little bit about the ransomware now that we are in this topic, and close up after that, because we have already talked too much, and we can stay and talk about those things forever. But I'm just thinking about the listeners. I don't know who is still with us and listening, but I don't really mind, because I just want to talk with you guys, talk about those topics. They are very interesting, and just have it chat. And if
by the way, we can do a trick. We can say right now, if you're listening right now to this minute, tweet us at the different and we'll see how many tweets we get. The classic.
Yes, we're around like 40, 50-ish minutes. So if you're still listening, just say, hey, I listened to that time. Hopefully you won't be the only one. But regardless, these talks are very interesting, and I'm just glad to have them with you guys. And maybe we can go into the ransomware execution. How did that happen? Was it, I believe Angelo said, using the AWS collector script, but was that deployed on every single workstation and run by the threat actor by different means? Or how did the ransomware deploy?
So basically, after the threat actor gained access to domain admin user on the last day of the intrusion, they accessed a domain controller. Then they loaded in memory the AWS collector file, and then they invoked one of the multiple functions that were available, specifically the locker one. So basically, in this function, you can specify multiple attributes. Specifically, you can specify the name of the DLL that obviously represents the ransomware executable, where you would like to put the executable, and also the name of a CMD file that is basically used to stop the different services that are running on the target system. Because obviously you have also to delete the shadow copies, and also, for example, stop backup services before starting encryption. So basically, they deployed through, if I remember correctly, PowerShell remoting this CMD file that was executed before the actual ransomware, and then the DLL of the locker was deployed into all the system infrastructure. So basically, everything started from a domain controller.
Okay, so they deployed on the domain controller, and what did you say at the end? What was transferred to the hosts?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, they specified that they wanted to place the Dagon Locker DLL file under the program data Microsoft folder, and basically they created this DLL under this folder. Obviously, they abused the $C shared folder to create this file into multiple systems, and then they executed the DLL.
That makes sense. Nas, do you have anything to add regarding this technique, or anything interesting you see related to the execution of the ransomware detections or anything? related to that.
I would like to add like something generic. I
Sure.
love generic ideas.
Yeah,
I would not speak specifically on this, but what I would like as usually like extract from these DFIR reports, they are very, very awesome in the sense that they provide a look into how the threat actors operate. And if you're a detection engineer, well, one of the best things you can do when looking at this report is, instead of like looking specifically, is looking at the methodology. Like, instead of them using rclone, what is rclone? Or like them using file.io, oh, it's a file sharing. They're using PowerShell, so it's a scripting engine. And it's a built-in scripting engine. Why did they like? Could they use WScript? Well, yeah. And could they use like CMD? Well, that's another option. And what like one of the things to take into consideration is that you should evaluate your risk appetite and, of course, your time, and build upon those ideas. Like today, we saw rclone and AWS CLI. Next week or next month, we might see a different thing. So when you're detecting at a tool level, it becomes really a coverage game instead of an idea game. The more you have coverage for these tools, even though, yes, you could use an API to query the registry, you can use this or that, but sometimes the level of telemetry will depend on the host. And yeah, you could have the latest EDR on 17 hosts, but you could have like only security log enabled with process creation on the affected host. And having this level of coverage and like predicting the future, if we can say that, is like we spoke about RMMs. Determine what RMM you use or what you can allow, and look at other RMMs and try to block them. Look at what they like. If you have the time, yeah, it's a very tedious task, but go beyond the report itself and in fact, like analyze what the threat actor is actually trying to do. Like in the exfiltration, yeah, now we're going into the route of MITRE ATT&CK, true, like a tactic versus a technique, but it is actually very important, especially if you do like a detection at this level. And I believe most people, if you don't have time to spend on reverse engineering things, and you're not like a dedicated analyst, and you're only looking at the maximum amount of time of looking at something is maybe 1 hour, 2 hours, you need to extrapolate on that and try to expand your horizons, I would say.
Yeah, that's very true. And I'm with you where you have to look into the tactic and the technique that threat actors are using, because if you just focus on the tool, you're just chasing your tail. We will keep playing this cat and mouse game and it will never end. But maybe look into the number of bytes that have been uploaded to a certain destination related to one of those services like File.io or Mega, for example, and see if you can have this type of telemetry. And if you do, maybe you want to detect any connection that is lasting more than 30 minutes, let's say, for large files. I don't know. I'm just guessing here. I don't know what different connections your organization is using, but or maybe you can look into the amount of data that are being uploaded to that service. Maybe you want to detect something over 50 megabytes, 100 megabytes. Even if you have it in your policy that users shouldn't be using this type of online services to upload data, but they do anyway. Maybe this is a good way of a compromise to detect at least suspicious behavior. And that's not to say that you won't miss things, but we all have to start from somewhere and try to baseline some of the basics that we see from threat actors here. And maybe we can do better next day. But everything starts from somewhere. And those are just some detection ideas that people can incorporate. You can't just plug and play what I'm just trying to describe here, but at least you can get some ideas on how to approach this. Thank you very much, Nas. Yes, that's very, very good point. And Ransom, any final thoughts before we close?
Well, last issue that I wanted to add before we close this podcast is the people who still keeps on saving clear text credentials into a text file or into a CSV file. We've seen that here, where the threat actor tries to look into those passwords via Notepad and then just leverage it. So you'll be surprised how many organizations, large, small organizations, and their network engineers, their systems admins, and even sometimes security professionals, and even developers are always keep on saving those passwords, credentials, or tokens into a notepad. So that's one thing that I'd like to just highlight right now before we close this, because it's been a while since we tackled this, but up until now we still keep on seeing this, because it's just a matter of one-liner PowerShell script that attacker needs to do to write or just to run for them to just collect all of this and then zip it into a file and then just use it as on a future reference. So just take note for the public there.
Yes, stop using passwords.txt and saving it to downloads or desktop, guys.
Yeah,
that's not a good way to do things. Use password managers. But yeah, thank you very much, Renzen. And I think it's time here to close this podcast. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. The two analysts for the amazing report and the insights that you provided through the report. Thank you very much. And Nas, thank you very much for being here with us. We have you again in the future. I know you'll be hopefully.
I will be. I will be available. I will make myself available. I love this kind of discussion. So.
Thank you very much, Nas. And
thanks,
thank you, everyone, for listening. And we hope to see you again on the next one.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.